All right, cool. So tonight, try something a little different. All right, instead of me just rambling on for about half an hour, 45 minutes, I thought I'd bring someone on that actually knows something, because I don't know anything other than how to punch a keyboard here and there. I
Well,
brought on
give
my good.
yourself a little bit of credit here.
So I brought on my good friend Kristian Ekenes here that I work with. Christian, say hello.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I've been working with Renee for, what is it, 6 years now? We've started at Esri about the same time,
I think so.
if I
We're right
recall
around a
correctly.
6 year point now. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you do? What do you do at Esri, Christian? What's your day to day and stuff? What is it you're all about, man?
So I'm a product engineer, so that's kind of this hodgepodge of roles on the JavaScript team, the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. It's a bit of a mouthful of a product, but it's the web API offering that Esri has. And what I do is I work principally on the Data Viz side. So the testing of the Data Viz functions. I also work on a project called Smart Mapping and Arcade. But I'm involved in a lot of different parts of it, everything from the design to the documentation, the testing, the a little bit of the development as well. So kind of
So
all
yeah,
over the place.
like so you've got like a decent cartographic background. You're not, and you know enough dev to get the job done, right? So you've got that nice mix of both there, which is really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Have I was a GIS specialist before coming to Esri. Got a master's degree in GIS, so made a fair amount of both paper and web maps in my day.
Nice.
So.
Do you see a lot of that, the paper map stuff and everything that transfers over the web really well, or is it just like a big change in terms of like how people visualize maps these days?
Well, the fundamentals are basically the same. The same concepts you would learn in a cartography course apply to the web. There are a lot of differences, though. I mean, the medium certainly matters a lot. And in the print world, you worry about things like layout and where do I place these things? What is the font size and what's my scale? Whereas the web, those things are more diluted. Like scale is not as much of a factor because you can zoom in and out and pan all over the place. You don't have layouts really, except for the people who want to print a map, which is always a little awkward. But I mean, fundamentals are the same, but functionally, yeah, the medium has a lot of major differences. Like legend is a huge deal in the print world. It's sort of it's an afterthought in the web world. I feel, and that's fine as long as the visual is intuitive and you're able to interact with your data, your features with charts and everything, then it's fine. But yeah, I think that there's some similarities, but there's probably more differences than similarities.
Yeah, because I mean now we're into the point where like if people are working on maps and they're all interactive and everything, right? We're doing highlighting and now there's the layers and effects and everything. I mean, a lot of times the depending on what state the map is in, the legend doesn't even reflect that anymore, right? So, uh, but the cool part is the fact that it's still close enough and people have an idea of what it is they're looking at and they're doing stuff, which is really cool. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask you about arcade, right? So arcade's been around for a while. I think even though it's been around for a while, I think a lot of people still have questions about arcade. Like, what exactly is it? What does it do? What does it mean for working with ArcGIS stuff and whatnot? Can you give us a little bit about that? Kind of how you use it?
Yeah, so just quick background. I think it started, well, we made it kind of officially part of Esri about 5 years ago. And what Arcade is, we call it an expression language, a scripting language. Uh, and that confuses a lot of people. I think a lot of people think of it as, oh, this is a brand new programming language and I can build apps with it or make a map with Arcade. And that's not what it is at all. It's much more like an Excel spreadsheet formula because it calculates a value. That's principally what it does. Get a bunch of inputs, calculate a value. And the reason that's important is people have a lot of data sets that they work with, and it could be data they own, it could be data that updates frequently, and they need to transform their data values. And they rather like I guess the traditional GIS workflow is I'm going to add a new field to this table, I'm going to calculate a new field, and that process can be cumbersome, especially again if that data updates a lot and you need to run a recalculation. You can of course script all that stuff, but Arcade allows you to handle that on the client. And what's really cool about it is not so much this kind of, I hesitate to use the word virtual field because that's not what it is, but it it kind of acts as if it were a virtual field in your data. But the cool thing about Arcade is its portability. And when we talk about ArcGIS and the different offerings that Esri has, they have desktop offerings with Pro, they have our web offerings and ArcGIS Online and the JavaScript API. They have all the runtime SDKs that run that for building apps on native devices. And the cool thing about Arcade is you can save those expressions to your layers, to your data sources, you can save them to your web maps, and then load those same resources in other applications, and the same syntax will evaluate exactly the same on each of those apps. So that's what it's really all about. It's about the sharing of it on top of just the simple client-side calculation, modifying your values.
Yeah, exactly. All the cross platform capabilities and stuff you get with it. Like you're talking about people doing the whole virtual fields. I think that's how a lot of people ended up with these shape files or GDBs of version 1, version 1 2,
Yeah.
version 1 2 dot final. And yeah, I mean, because you're up there doing all this stuff with your data, creating new fields, recalculating stuff left and right. And yeah, it was just a mess to data management wise to work with that. And Arcade kind of simplifies that for analysis stuff, right? So it's really cool. But like if you're doing a visualization, like certain things you can't realistically do because they're too expensive visually wise, right? If I want to apply it, that's why Arcade has, he said, what are the profiles? I think they're
Yep.
called, right? So there's a label profile, graphic profile, is that right? Or jump?
There's a visualization profile and a pop-up
That's
profile.
right. Yeah.
We got all sorts of weird names like feature Z profile and calculate profile. There's all sorts of them. Yeah.
But like these that every now and then the question will come up, oh, can I use arcade expression to find the nearest neighbor kind of a thing for my 100,000 points on the map, and each point is based off of like the 5 closest features to it based on their value. That's just too expensive for something like arcade to really pull off visually, right? That's like a
Yeah, I mean,
pop-up kind of feature.
yeah, so you can definitely do that in a pop-up where um, we have this concept called feature sets or feature set functions in Arcade where it fundamentally just means I'm going to access data from another layer, or maybe it's features from the same layer I'm working with. Because Arcade, most of the time you're working within the context of just the feature or the graphic. And that's where the bread and butter is. It executes quickly there, but of course everyone wants to do what you're saying, Renee, like with it's spatial, right? I want to see what my neighbors are. I want to see where this overlay intersects something. And so you do get access to other data sources within an expression, but it does come with a cost, especially if you're requesting data from a server. And so we cannot allow you to do that in visualization, though there are kind of ways to hack around it if you really wanted to do it. But the pop-up definitely allows you to do that. And there's workflows that we promote that allow you to optimize that. So for example, you have a point in one layer and you want the pop-up to tell you the 5 closest restaurants from a layer of 100,000 restaurants. You could provide some kind of assumption in the expression,
Oh,
like,
okay.
oh, I know that my closest restaurants are going to be within 10 miles or 5 miles, or you insert whatever distance you think is reasonable for someone to search, because they're probably not going to search for a restaurant, say, more than 10 miles away or 40 miles. So you can buffer your features and then get the intersection and then order them that way. So we do promote workflows for helping you, but you could definitely do some damage with some bad
Oh,
expressions.
that's fun stuff. That's fun stuff. So I'm looking at like you do a ton of blog posts on the Esri blog, and like you're seriously, you've got at least like 2 or 3 blog posts a month, I think. what you're on track for at the moment. Maybe like 2 a month. Every now and
It's
then you go a
probably closer
streak.
to one. Yeah.
So it seems like you get a streak every now and then of stuff. But I mean, so getting all these blog post stuff together, is this like when you're researching the features that are going into the API for all the visualization tools, and your the blog posts come out of that, the testing and the feature research you have to do?
Yeah, they sort of come out from the whole process. And kind of what I tell people about the blogs is I like to, it's kind of my way of once a feature that I've worked on with together in the team is released, I like to write the blog post about it to kind of say, this is all the work that went into it. These are the considerations we had. Because that's what developers kind of want to know too. They want to
Mhm.
know what went into the development process, not just how to use it. We have documentation and samples that show that, but what was all the thinking? And it definitely incorporates a lot of the test scenarios that I looked at or others looked at during the process of development. So it's I do think about the blog during the process of the work, but it does come all together after the fact for sure. And it's kind of half of it's for me because I like to have an easy resource to point others to and say, hey, this will step you through how this symbol works or how this new renderer works in an easy to read manner that's not just like API reference that can be kind of hard to
Yeah,
digest. So yeah.
awesome. So in addition to arcade and stuff, I wanted to talk about smart mapping, right? So I'm a huge fan because, for example, I my cartographic skills are okay. I've done paper maps and all that for years and stuff, but it's definitely a big help using smart mapping to help me out. So could you talk about that and how it helps developers that might not have that cartographic background make decent looking maps or even really awesome maps?
Yeah. So first off, Renee, I think you should give yourself a little more credit. You probably, I think you make better maps than you give yourself credit
have
for.
you seen my Lakers vector tile base
Oh,
map?
it's terrible. I think you do that on purpose, though. I don't know.
Oh, it's so bright. I love it.
Well, so the interesting thing about cartography and data viz is I don't think it's really all that hard when you know the fundamentals. Yeah, choosing color ramps and stuff like that is difficult, and knowing kind of what colors go well together can be a little tricky at times. But it's one of those things where I think if you have the patience for it and you put in the time, anyone can make a really good, solid looking map that would be publishable and it could stand out anywhere. And I truly believe that. I just think that most bad maps come from impatience and from the lack of time. So, I mean, coming from a consulting world in GIS, I think this is most people can identify with this, where you're given a data dump and it's like, okay, make me a map in 30 minutes. That's all I budgeted for you in this project. And of course you're not going to come up with something good in 30 minutes. You see all sorts of beautiful maps on the web, on Twitter, kind of out there, and you're like, oh, I wish that I could make a map like that. And it's like, well, you can. You just got to put in the 500 hours to make that thing, because that's basically what people do. They spend days and days making it beautiful. Well, enter smart mapping here, because what I think the real value of smart mapping is that it helps cut out that time of trying to just figure things out. I think when you have software that doesn't really give you good defaults, like it just doesn't give you a good default color ramp, it doesn't really tell you much about the data. It just says, oh, I want to add 4 breaks, but it doesn't tell you how it breaks up the data. It's not very helpful. It just, again, it forces you to spend more time just trying to figure out what your data is all about. And so smart mapping, I think it cuts out it saves you a lot of time on just getting started. And it's not ever been designed about, it's never been about, this is the best map for this data. It's about, this is probably the best starting point for you. And so what it is it's a suite of functions where you can just pass in a layer, you specify a field or an arcade expression, and then it will spit out a default visualization that will tell you something about your data. It could be an above and below color ramp with these really nice colors that are designed by color experts here at Esri or others in the industry. And it will say, oh, your base map is dark, so we suggest these colors, or it's this color, so we suggest these. And based on the distribution, the spread of your data, we feel that this these breakpoints make the most sense. And so again, it's not about giving you the ending point, it's about getting you started quickly with something more useful.
And I think the base map updates were done like a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years ago. Where before it used to be just uh, the base maps right out of the box. We had color maps for, right, and then at one point we have it now actually sample whatever base map you're using, take those colors, and then we give you so suggested color map, right?
Yeah.
Which is that's really nice. That's a really cool feature because now I can have this ridiculous base map that I've made, such as a purple, yellow, and gold Lakers base map, and get some nice smart mapping defined renderers for me to use in my applications, which is really cool.
I don't know if it would give you something nice with that base map, but it would give you something for sure. Something
Exactly.
better than what it would before. Yeah.
So I mean, what else is cool with that is the fact that uh, a lot of the utilities for the smart mapping tools are ones like the creators, I think we call them, right? They take a feature layer. I could take my map image layer though, create that feature layer from a sub layer, give it to smart mapping tools, then apply that renderer to my map image layer and get back a raster map with that renderer, right? I mean, that's
Correct,
that's
yes.
pretty powerful. That's really cool. The fact that server can do the same thing for me as I can do on the client in terms of like these unique value renderers or whatever else we're doing this stuff. Um, I know one of the things you use a lot is the dot density render, right? It's a pretty popular one. I mean, when would someone use something like dot density versus like just a plain choropleth map or something? Like, when do you think is a good use case for something like that?
I think anytime you can use a choropleth map, you could use a dot density.
Oh, okay.
It really depends on your audience, of course, but density it it's most commonly used with something like population. You use it with a total count. So the main difference though, so when you have a choropleth map, you should always, I should say, be using normalized data. So you will show population density by area, or you'll show the percentage of the population that attained a college degree, or the percentage of the population that voted for a particular candidate in an election. That's the type of things you'd use a choropleth map for. Density allows you to kind of remove that normalization step, and you can just refer to that total, and it will assign a dot count and randomly place it within the polygon and say, okay, this many people are represented by this dot, and you get basically that you'll see the same patterns that you would in the normalized choropleth. It's just a slightly different view. I think it's a little more attractive, and the other thing too about the dot density that I think is advantageous over the choropleth is it really removes the problems that choropleth brings, where choropleth has this, it introduces this problem with that we call the modifiable areal unit problem, where it basically puts too much emphasis on land area that is irrelevant in a lot of demographic data, in most demographic data. And so dot density, because it's using these tiny little dots, it removes the color on that area that you normally would see in a choropleth. So I think there are definite advantages to it, but it's not for everyone either. Not everybody likes the dot density view. They prefer the choropleth. But yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, this is a ghetto Zoom call. It's going to end in a bit, but I didn't want to ask you. I got a spring for Pro Zoom if I want these things to go much longer. But I just want to ask, what kind of data viz advice you got for developers out there, maybe just getting started with the API or ArcGIS stuff in general? What are your suggestions for them to do some cool stuff?
Well, the advice I would provide is to take the time to do your homework on good data viz practices, and we provide great resources. You mentioned the blogs already, but we have guide pages that will guide you through different visualization styles, when to use it, how to use it, which colors to use. We have a suite of color ramps we provide out of the box that you could see on our, again, it's another guide page that allows you to query for different types of color ramps. I would do that, do your due diligence there. But also, it comes down to getting to know your data and then practicing it. And on top of that, looking at what other people do. So
Nice.
not just me or you and your Lakers map, but get online, get on Twitter or other places where people create beautiful maps and see the types of things they're doing and mimic it. Because quite honestly, that's what most of the professionals are doing anyway. They're just copying other people, and it looks good. They're just applying slightly different tweaks to it.
Yeah.
So
Nice. Awesome. Hey, well, I appreciate you coming on, Kristian. I know that you've got a busy night still ahead of you. I really appreciate your time. I'll be hitting you up later in the week. Don't worry about it. But thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
sure, it's been a pleasure, Renee.
Awesome, bro. Thanks.
Okay, see ya.